Appreciate everybody's participation. Today we're joined by some wonderful people. I'll go into that in a moment. The topics we're going to cover, the history of CMMC briefly, for those of you who might not be familiar, a little bit of an overview of 48 CFR and how it connects to 32. We're going to talk about flow down requirements, how that might affect you or your subs. We're going to talk about your actual assessments, how to prepare, next steps for people working with the department we're in. Then we'll cover some questions and answers. Please feel free to put your questions into the chat as we proceed, and we will be taking them as we go along. There is a resources tab. So if you have that, you can click on it and see some of the things we're mentioning, various links and other pieces that could help you. And certainly we'll send a summary after the meeting as well. All right. I'm Tobias Musser, co-CEO of MNS Group. And on the call, we have with us Michael Dempsey, the CEO of CISEVE, and Brian Hubbard, the president of Evolved Cyber. MNS Group is, I guess we've been around now for 25 years, and we've specialized in CMMC and helping defense contractors since 2015. We have a lot of people doing this work all over the world, and our why is really supporting the warfighter who's risking their lives so we can talk about how to run our businesses and make a living. On the call, we have Michael Dempsey, CEO of CISEVE. He is also the person who developed the secure CMMC product that's used by 20% of all C3POs throughout the world. And we have Brian Hubbard, the president of Evolved Cyber, and he has been involved in so many things. The NIST cybersecurity framework. He's one of the few people who knows what the Orange Book is back in the Rainbow Series days. An expert in security. He's worked in developing training and content. He's a trainer. He trained me, and I've appreciated that. And we're happy and honored to have both of these gentlemen on the call with us today. During the call, we cannot give you specific advice. So if you put a question in and you want to know how to or what to do, we're probably not going to be able to give you any specifics. We can speak to general things that are in the rule. Basically, we'll be quoting what's in the rule and not giving you specifics. All right, we're going to throw up a poll now just to get a sense of where the audience is. Where are you in your CMMC journey? If you take a moment here and click, just hopefully we can tune what we're doing just a little bit. Thank you, everybody, for clicking through here. It seems like we're almost at 50-50 people hopeful in 2025 and sometime in 2026, and appreciate everybody's feedback there. So there's the results for everybody. All right, so history of CMMC, just a quick backgrounder. Most of you are probably familiar with this. The objectives here, protecting information and ultimately protecting the warfighter, the country, our ability to sleep at night, as some friends in an earlier webcast at Future Feed said earlier this week. We're all here as a team trying to protect the country. The information that is being protected is not secret. It's information that used to not matter. Before the internet, this information didn't need to be protected in quite the same way. But in the era of big data and the ability to concatenate information from lots of different places, even seemingly innocuous things like I always ask people to imagine a hot dog stand that sells 100 hot dogs a month to a base and suddenly gets an order for 10,000 hot dogs. Suddenly that information about hot dog orders can actually give actionable troop movement information. So we now have to protect information in a more stringent way that did not need to be protected in the same way in the past. Brian, could you talk a little bit about the different levels?
Sure. So CMMC was structured to basically protect all DoD contract information, basically. So we start out with federal contract information, right? So that's information that's provided under a contract that's not designated by the DoD for public release. And that needs to be protected by 17 fundamental controls, actually 15 fundamental controls out of a FAR clause that's been around since, I believe, 2017. FAR clause 52.204-21, and that provides 15 basic controls that all federal contractors have to meet. And in CMMC, that translates into 17 of the 800-171 controls. So level 1 is just a basic foundation, and that's for all contracts that are storing, processing, or transmitting federal contract information. Level 2 is for the protection of CUI. So it was designed to protect any information that is either provided to a contractor or is developed under a contract that would be considered CUI in one of the CUI categories. And that was first introduced as basically the protection of CUI is first introduced under DFARS 252.204-7012, which required NIST 800-171 to be met. And we'll talk about the history of that, but level 2 is implementation of all 110 controls. And while level 1 is always a self-assessment and self-attestation, level 2 can be either a self-attestation or a C3PO assessment. And then level 3 adds an addition, is really reserved for those programs that have really sensitive CUI, and the DoD has said, well, we really want to protect this even more stringently, even though it's still CUI. And they've added 24 controls out of NIST 800-172 to the mix, and level 3 will be conducted by the DIBCAC when those are required. When a level 3 is required, a level 2 certification assessment must first be conducted and passed before the level 3 assessment can be done.
Thank you, Brian.
Mm-hmm.
Michael, on this next slide, sort of going over the history, could you talk a little bit about the 1.0, the 2.0, and then we'll go into sort of how we got here?
Sure thing. So I'm going to start off CMMC, Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. In version 1, it was a maturity approach to your cybersecurity assessment. It was difficult. It was going to be really hard. You had to show a history and a maturity in your system. And so 1.0 came out requiring that. If we all remember, it was .99, .998, and .997. Hopefully a lot of you are shaking your head like, oh my God, yeah. And so they realized that wasn't going to work. And so they went back to the drawing board, came back out a year later with version 2.0, which is the current state of CMMC. So it kind of streamlined the process by getting rid of the maturity part and sticking just to the 171. At which point, the following year, they worked on that. C3POs were given feedback. They developed it a little bit better. And then come 2024, the program became official, finally. Bells and whistles and balloons went off on October 15th in 2024 because 32 CFR came out and kind of brought it almost there. We were almost home. We were on third base, ready to go. We started the joint surveillance assessments in 2024, and here's a pretty picture of it. And then just weeks ago, 48 CFR came out, which is the final piece of CMMC. It's come full circle. It's ready to go. There are no other hurdles for it, so we're ready to begin.
All right, thank you for that. Brian, could you talk a little bit about what this CUI is?
Sure. So, I mean, the federal CUI program, it started basically as a result of a 9/11 Commission study that said, basically that found that unclassified information that should be shared between federal agencies really wasn't able to be shared because of inconsistencies or incongruities with the way things were labeled, and it really slowed down a response activities for under 9/11. So the federal government went about did that study, and then President Obama under Executive Order 13556 initiated the CUI program that basically said, okay, we're going to have a standard marking program across the entire federal government. And the National Archives was set up as the executive agent for that program, and they maintain a directory essentially of CUI labels. Now, on the defense side of the house, there's a defense CUI program that is in lockstep with that national program, and they have defined specific categories of CUI shown here about what they really, really care about. So the first one is controlled technical information, which is probably the vast majority of the types of CUI that contractors will be receiving. And then the critical infrastructure, DoD critical infrastructure, nuclear related things, and privileged safety information that have to do with defense. So there's a number of these categories, and these are called the defense CUI categories, which are important because for later on, this is how we'll determine the contracting officers will determine what type of an assessment you need to have if you're storing, processing, or transmitting CUI as part of your contract.
Thanks, Brian.
So I'm going to add.
Yeah.
So CUI can take a whole entire webinar all by itself. So that was just a short overview of it. If you go out to the NARA site that Brian referenced, you may become overwhelmed. Don't be afraid. Your contracting officer is the main person. So if you're not sure if something's supposed to be, it's marked, it's not marked, contracting officer is your resource to go to confirm if it's CUI or not. That was the short answer.
That's a great point. Yes.
I'll add one more because I suspect we may get that question. If you're pursuing a contract and you don't yet have CUI, then you have to build a framework, a boundary, a system that will be ready for it when it comes. And I guess you could apply that same theory to people who don't know if they have it or not. You still have to build it.
Yeah, I always tell folks I'm consulting with that, look, if you have DFAR 7012 in your contract now, you can expect to have CMMC Level 2 in your contract. And whether or not you think you have CUI or not, the government's going to expect you to be compliant.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. You're all here for this. And that is this overview of 48. So 48 is part of two rules that work together. It is the part that implements the earlier rule, CFR 32, and they work together. Michael, could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So 32 CFR, which came out last year, is it created the CMMC program officially. So now it's a formal process and framework within DoD. And 48 CFR that just came out is the implementation of the 32 CFR. So 48 allows them to put it into your contracts, allows them to have you be assessed against the CMMC standards that we have. So 32 created the program, 48 is saying it goes into your contracts. That's that really the short version of what those two are and why it matters to you.
So thank you for that. So within 48, there's some things that had slight changes from the pre-publication to post-publication. And I just want to take a moment to draw everybody's attention to things that that there's been some question floating around. And so I think this will provide a little clarity for you. So there is a pre-made notice that's going to go into every contract. If you download the 48 CFR rule, it's 18 pages, 9 pages if you print it double-sided. It's not too long, but in the very last page, you'll find what you'll see in every one of your contracts. And about a paragraph in, your contract officer is going to specify what level that you need to achieve. And whatever level's there, if you are a prime or if you're in the middle and you have subs below you, or if you're a sub, that's all going to flow down directly to you. You are now required as a sub to provide screen captures to your prime if they request it to validate it. And the part of the rule says that they have the right to do that and that they should. Since the DoD doesn't have a direct contract with the subs, they're not allowed to go check that for the prime. And so this is why you'll probably see letters, if you're a sub, from your prime asking for you to send them a level 2 certificate. This is part of what will make the program expand perhaps more quickly than the government planned in its 3-year rollout. It's much easier from a liability perspective for your primes to just ask you to have a level 2 certificate and share that with them than it is to try to specify for you how to do a screen capture off the SPRS or SPRS website showing that you have a current status. Also, the UIDs, it's a new add-on, sort of, if you think of it from the cage code, it's more specific for your system. And additionally, it really gives an option for things that are not 3- and 5-point items to be POAM'd for up to 180 days. So you can get this conditional certificate and a brief window of time to try to resolve that so that you can receive the award of a contract. Award requires that you have a certificate or a conditional at the time of award. So one of the things, as you would read through the rule, you'll notice the government estimated a certain number of people will need certifications. And they didn't, in my opinion, take into account how many people will pursue winning a contract. And it takes so much time, right? It takes so much effort to do this. You can't pursue a contract and then decide to get a certificate when you find out that you're going to get to the award. That could be in 30, 45 days. And so there's going to be a lot more people who need level 2 certificates because you have to have that in order to receive the award. And it has to be in SPRS at the time of award. Just a word sort of on the amount of time it takes. We're seeing anywhere from 10 weeks, maybe to the shortest of 6 weeks to go through an assessment process. Michael, Brian, what are you seeing?
Well, it depends on what you mean by this whole assessment process. So life cycle of getting ready.
Yeah, I was thinking about, hey, you're ready and you're going to go get an assessment.
Yeah, that's about right. Sometimes it's up to 90 days.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, from beginning to end, finding a C3PO, that's probably going to be the longest process because you want to be interviewing and selecting someone good because they're going to be deciding whether you get contracts or not, basically, right? So you want to make sure you have a C3PO that you can work with. And then from there, then it's, 5 to 7 weeks long, the duration of the assessment, depending on the results and whether you need to exercise that phase 4 that Toby talked about for 180 days.
Yeah, so some other things here on the slide for you that are new things. I would also say that they did clarify a question regarding acquisitions and if a new company came in underneath, whether you'd need a new assessment. And they said that if you're adding users to an existing system, that's perfectly fine. You don't need a new assessment. A new system entirely, though, would need a new assessment. It's important also that if you have an HLO, a high-level organization, that you have all of the appropriate cage codes and everything lined up and correct in SPRS before you have your C3PO do an assessment and submit that, because that kind of locks you in. I think we talked about many of the items on here. something people have been surprised about is the extension and option years. You have to have this certificate to get some of those. They can add those after the fact. They can restrict payment on certain contracts if they add it and you don't have it in between. And additionally, the in-between years require, and just a reminder, require that the firming official sign off that you're still doing this. And that person is personally, legally responsible for all 320 claims. So if you wanted to blow it out to sort of ridiculous, if they lied about all 320, you know, you're talking about $60 million of fines and 600 years in jail or something like that, right? Obviously, somebody's not going to lie about every single one, but intention doesn't matter. So it's very important that you have a program running, and in those in-between years, you are really making sure the program continues to run. Other things that are rumor and scuttlebutt but seem to be accurate is that the federal CUI rule has gone through its comment period, and sometime between December and March that will come out and move this requirement into all federal agencies. And version 3 of NIST, which has 40% more requirements, they've stated publicly there's a goal to have it in effect by the end of next year. So there's certainly an advantage to getting an assessment on level 2 before that comes out, because then you have 36 months possibly to update that, unless you win an additional contract that would require level 3 in addition to that. Michael, Brian, anything that I missed? Any other thoughts?
It's like, so I think the HLO thing you mentioned is really important. You have to have your SPRS in order. Because when, as a C3PO, we enter it into EMAS, that's how it gets pushed over to SPRS and your certification ends up over there. If your HLO and cage codes and everything below it don't match up with what we've submitted, it will not come over and you won't get credit for it.
Yeah, thank you for that. So go into SAM and make sure everything's right. Takes about 24 hours to go from SAM to SPRS. Just as a by the by, that's anecdotal observation. All right, so we're talking about SPRS, SPRS, and the SPRS score. Brian, can you give us a little bit of a rundown on this and talk about how it might affect conditional certification?
Sure. So the SPRS score that everybody talks about, right, is based on the DoD's 800-171 assessment methodology, right? And it assigns point values. So basically everybody starts out with 110, and you have point subtractions based on controls that are not met. So there are 5-point controls, there are 3-point controls, and there are 1-point controls. 5-point controls and 3-point controls, obviously those take away quickly, and those are not eligible for POAM. So if you start missing those, you're not going to get certified and you're not going to get a conditional certification. So in order to get a conditional certification, one must score at least an 88, or I should say meet at least 88 of the controls, which is 80% of the controls. And you cannot miss a 3-point or a 5-point control and a handful of 1-point controls that are not eligible for POAMs. So if you meet those criteria, then at the end of an assessment, if you haven't scored 110, you are eligible for a conditional level 2 certification, and you have 180 days after that then to work off those plans of action and milestones that would be generated based on your formal assessment. It's important to note too, going into an assessment, if your score is, you scored yourself at a 40, where this thing's sort of pegged out, don't go into an assessment, right? You should go into an assessment thinking and believing full-heartedly that you're 110. Okay, and an assessment shouldn't even start if you don't think you're 110.
Michael, you go ahead.
I was just going to add the conditional part. So if you get a conditional, you have that window to fix it. If
Yeah.
you don't meet that standard and you don't pass the assessment, you go all the way back to the first step. So
Right.
you gotta start all over, do the C3PO, walk through that whole process, and including the cost of a second assessment. So when you go in, you want to be ready to go, like Brian was saying, because you don't want to risk paying for it twice.
Michael, could you talk about, like, there's a 180-day window, but a C3PO has to have time, right, to come in and look at those. Could you talk about that? Is it really 180 days?
So it is not 180 days for you to fix your issues. We have 180 days to update EMAS, that you've completed that. So you probably have about 150, 145 days to give us 30 days to come back, review it, mark it as met or not met, and then submit it into EMAS so that it does it. If that's not done on the 181st day, EMAS automatically closes out the assessment as not met. So you have less than 180 to fix and 180 for us to put it into the system.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. Additionally, if you're not familiar with the rollout that's in the CFR 32 rule, it's positioned as a 4-year rollout, but the 4th year is just that the program is running. So in reality, it's like a 3-year ramp up. And in the first year, it specifies that people can do self-attestation. Observationally, as C3POs, we're seeing that many people are going ahead and getting their level 2 certificate. So it's not that this rule kicks in November 10th and everybody has to have a certificate. The government's designed a phased rollout, but market forces and business risk are driving the adoption and the requests for level 2 certificates ahead of that. I think the version 3 looming in the next 18 months is also driving people to try to go under the lighter load of the version 2 that's in place right now.
On that note, Toby, I also warn people that your contracts, you may think you're going to get a self-assessment in your contract, but your prime, if you're a sub, your prime may want to reduce their risk and not want to believe a self-assessment. And they're going to they may demand a certification assessment ahead of the contract actually demanding it.
Yeah,
that's a really good point. Michael, any thoughts?
No, I totally agree. I have seen primes already asking that as early as last year.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't formally give me, are you certified level 2? They send out questionnaires and it's the 110 questions, right? So they get a feel for it. So a lot of the prime, the level 1 primes, Raytheons, Lockheeds, things like that, are really trying to get their subs in line now. And as Toby mentioned, the business part is they just won't use you, right? They'll go find someone else who's already certified. So it's a very big business decision you have to make. Do you want to do it now and risk not getting a contract, or risk your prime not keeping you on if an option year is exercised and requires it and you're not there?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you for those thoughts. I want to offer a reminder that we have resources, and one of the things you should always keep in mind when you go to these webinars, when you talk to a C3PO or an RPO, the DoD website is the final source of truth. So if you go to the DoD CMMC website, there's a drop down there, and they have a resource page, and the level 2 assessment guide that's there is the same assessment guide for you to do a self-assessment. It's the same assessment guide that we use as a C3PO assessment. And it gives concrete examples of answers for each of the 320 inquiries that we'll make, the things we're looking for objective evidence that you are doing and that you have implementation statements that match what you were doing. So definitely an excellent resource to read through the level 2 assessment guide. It is designed both for your self-assessment and for those of us who are C3POs as well. Michael, could you talk a little bit about a mock assessment and how's that different from a gap assessment and the language used in the market?
Yes, a lot of confusion out there on this factor. So I'm going to start with the gap assessment, which you hear a lot of. Gap assessments basically include consultative responses. So someone comes in, RPO, a C3PO will come in to assist you. They'll go through an assessment-like interview process and then tell you what you have to do to get prepared. You know, install this, configure this, do that. A mock assessment is conducted just like an actual certifying assessment. The assessor will come in, ask all the questions, but he'll only provide that met, not met answer as if it was in a certifying assessment. So you get a sense of where you are in that scale that we talked about. Additionally, so as a side note, you will get some idea from us. So a mock assessment, based on the questions you don't answer correctly, you have an idea of what you need to fix. We just don't tell you what to fix. It just happens during the mocks. And then the actual certifying assessment, level 2 by the C3PO, is conducted. They'll ask all the same questions. They'll mark you met, not met, and that's the end of it. If you make it, if you get a 110 score, you get certified. If you get the 88 or above, all 3s and 5s, you get a conditional. As we mentioned, you're able to be awarded a contract during that 180 days with the conditional from the certifying assessment.
Thank you for that. In terms of the urgency, you know, we don't want to sell fear. We want to be useful. What are you guys seeing in terms of wait times to get scheduled for an assessment? What are you hearing about as you're both doing assessment work actively right now?
I'll speak from a non-C3 perspective.
Okay.
I'm scheduling gap assessments out in November, December, just for gaps, right? So people are calling me and say, "Oh, hey, we need a gap this month because we're going to assess next month." Sorry, hard sell. And then of course I'm hearing from those clients that yeah, they're looking out in 2026 as their earliest time they can get assessed.
Michael, what are you seeing?
So as a C3PO, we get a lot of calls. People feel they're ready. They want to do it now. Unfortunately, lots of the C3POs are already booked out until the end of the year. Several are booked out into first quarter of next year. A lot of that is due to a lack of CCAs too, not just C3POs, but the CCAs. Every assessment requires 2.25 CCAs on each one. So there's just not enough of those to go around either. So a lot of C3POs can only do it sequentially. So one assessment back to back to back. So they're well booked out into February and March because they're doing that. We right now are out into December, but we have a much larger team, so we're able to do a couple each week instead of just a single one. But we are still there. We are seeing a lot of customers coming out asking for Q2, Q3, wanting to get on the books already now to make sure they're ready. So they're not prepared, they tell us, but they want to schedule it anyway.
Okay. Yeah, we're seeing similar wait times and similar inquiries about the second quarter seems to be really picking up, that people are interested in that. And I don't want to put anybody on the spot completely, but can you give like a range of what a quality assessment would run in terms of a cost? Is that something that's possible to do?
It's generally hard. We have to know a few things about your organization. You know, is it a fully cloud system? Are there on-prem devices? Are you doing print and CUI locally? Those kinds of things. So that would involve site visits or no site visits. So the range really depends on, you know, typical IT answer, right? It depends on the system that you have and how it's being utilized. And where it is. So if we have to fly to, you know, Guam again, it's it tends to be a little bit more pricier.
Yeah. So just I want to clarify a question that came in. We touched on it, and I'll go back to this cost thing. The government has said that they want version 3 to be in contracts at the end of next year, December of next year. What that would mean from a C3PO perspective is that those people who have that in the contract, they then would have to be assessed against version 3 after that is in the contract requirement. Like they have to know they need it, but they would need it before the award. So if they put it into next December, it means we'll make it through next September's contract rounds, and it would likely be in contracts the following September. That's in 27. Michael, Brian, do you think
Yeah.
that's accurate logic?
Well, I mean, so there's a magical thing that has to happen before level revision 3 can be used, and that's the 32 CFR rule, which took 2 years to get out, has to be revised. Now, it may be a quicker revision, and I know that the DoD has stated they're working on it already, but it takes a long time to get those rules published and through reviews and out the door. It's typically, it's, well, track record on this thing it's been 2 years. So and this just got published October 2024. So maybe the new rule could come out in October 2026, if they're lucky.
Yeah. I mean, we do know that the president personally signed off on releasing the rule, so that gives extra oomph to the speed and action in this regard. Back to the range of costs, what we can tell everybody very accurately is the government has published that it thinks it's a 200-hour effort to do an assessment. This is separate from the time you spend getting ready, separate from the time you spend during the assessment for your own people. That's the C3PO's time spent from project management to submitting to EMAS to actually reviewing the documents to the week of live interviews. In real life, sometimes it goes much quicker than that, maybe 130, 150 hours. But you could do some napkin math in terms of making sure that you're getting reasonable proposals based on that level of effort and just looking at market rates for highly qualified people. If you see it too much lower than certain numbers, you should ask lots of questions. All right, what can contractors do now? We'll talk a little bit about what we're seeing here. We were talking about the wait listing and the backlog. Brian, could you talk about the workload piece and Michael, could you talk about the scoping and requirements?
So workload as far as getting ready.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a technical solution, right? Then that you put together. You may have a great system put up, and that's going to take some time to get your technical system, your IT team system together. But then there's this whole other thing that it has to have the policies, the procedures you follow. All of that has to be documented. Evidence that you're actually following those processes and procedures needs to be generated. The prep of the team for how do they answer assessor questions? How are they going to demonstrate that a control is met? And remember, you have to demonstrate all 320 assessment objectives. It's not 110 things, it's 320 things that you have to actually demonstrate during that. So prepping for that, I mean, I've seen all types. The people that don't prep much usually don't do well in the assessment, and typically get bounced out of what is phase 1 of the CMC assessment process, which is the preparation phase. If you're not ready when you step up to meet a C3PIO and his team, then if your SSP isn't in good shape and you'll get bounced back, and you'll basically have to get back in line again for the formal assessment. So the work you put in up front is really key. And again, it depends on the size of your organization and the bureaucracy of your organization. But you can certainly, and it is a cultural shift. I wish I should emphasize that. So there's a lot of intangibles associated with the costs and workload to actually get ready. It's not just magically go out and buy a set of templates and I'm good. You actually have to live and breathe this stuff in-house.
And so I'm going to kind of go off on that. The larger scope here is really The assessment is more rigorous, is the way we put it on the slide. And it doesn't mean it's hard from the assessor asking questions. It's hard for you to demonstrate and present to them that you're doing it. So one of the things we do see a lot is people are doing it correctly, but they can't present it to the assessor correctly so that he knows it's actually there, right? The two things the government always says, right? If it's not written down, you're not doing it. And if you don't write it down, you didn't do it, right? So if you have a process, what folks are doing, they're not getting artifacts. Oh, John looks at that every Friday. How do you prove that, right? There's no evidence to support that. So you have to have a process that does that. So that's the rigorous part, is making sure all your processes end up with an artifact, a meeting minutes or something like that. And makes it harder is what you have in your environment. So if you have Windows 10, Windows 11, and Linux machines, you need a piece of evidence for each type of those devices for most of the controls. Show me the passwords are on Linux, show me the passwords are on Windows, and so forth. So you may say, oh, I need 320 artifacts, but if you have multiple technologies and applications in your environment, you need to demonstrate that for each. So you could end up with hundreds of artifacts that you need. That's really where the rigor and the scope of preparing for the assessment itself is ready. So Brian had talked about getting the environment and your company ready. What I just spoke to is what it takes to have the assessment and be prepared for that day.
Yeah. Well, and the other piece of that is, if you have an external service provider, like a managed service provider or an MSSP helping you with your environment, they're going to participate in the assessment. So they need to be ready too. And they should be following processes and procedures and have the evidence ready for you. They can actually themselves go after a level 2 certification, and they probably should. But even if they have one, they're still going to have to participate in your assessment with you to show the assessor how things are being done.
So the assessor doesn't have to accept that anybody says they do a thing. They have to go and look and see that it's actually being done.
Exactly. Yeah. In fact, you get the situation where they say, well, I sent you a picture of a screenshot of something. Well, that's really interesting. Now show me that you're still doing that. It's really, you have to prove it. Say what you're going to do what you're going to do, what you say you do, and then prove it. And that's through records, evidence, and through demonstrations.
So we often, when people ask us about GRC tools, we don't recommend a specific one and wouldn't direct you that way on a call like this. What I could say is, if you made a list of the 320 things, and then you made a list of who in your company is responsible to answer the question about that, and then what document or policy or procedure or practice address that, and then what page and paragraph in that document, policy, procedure, or practice addressed it, that would be a good way for you to know if you're ready. I mean, if you have answers for all of those things, and this, what I just quoted to you, comes straight out of the Level 2 assessment guide I mentioned earlier. So yeah, there's many GRC tools out there. You could use a spreadsheet, you could use a tool, but just knowing where everything is that step that will make sure you're ready. We want to make sure that we have time for some questions, but we just want to make sure you're prepared for where you're at now. You should have everything organized in SAM with their HLO. You should have your SPRS score already posted. You should have already done that. And if you suspect that you're going to be at level 2, you should start your self-assessment now. You'll want to do that to make sure you're ready for a C3 PAO assessment and put those scores in. Plan for anything that you're missing and check out your supply chain. If you have subs and they can't comply, that could damage your ability to deliver on your contractual equipments or requirements, and limit your ability to share information with them. So any additional thoughts in the what to do now, Brian or Michael?
Oh, I think we did a lot. Talk to C3POs. That's all I can say. Start now, whether you're ready or not. To be prepared for the assessment, but start talking to them now.
Oh, and I would say you definitely do that, and then if you're doing all this work in-house, get an outside opinion. It will pay off in dividends. And make sure that outside opinion is from a certified assessor. You do not want to just go to somebody who has never been involved in an assessment. And, they may be a really great cybersecurity person. But if they haven't been involved in one of these assessments, you're not going to get the accurate information on how to succeed.
All right. So a last thought of some things we're seeing that should be set off some alarm bells. Just be cautious as you're out there looking for assessors and are looking to meet these requirements. One, when you are assessed in a certain environment, if you have a major change, say you move the vendor, maybe you bought vendor X because they charge you PDQ dollars a month and it's really cheap. You may pass, but you can't leave their system for 36 months without buying or procuring a new assessment on the target environment before you move into it. So selecting your MSP or your cloud providers, these are questions that have 36-month implications. So tread carefully. Also, you may want to make sure you own your environment. Another thing to consider, buying fractional compliance might be the answer for a smaller business. Again, you're going to be locked in for 36 months. Take into account any exit plans you have. If you own your tenants and your environments, that gives you additional freedom. If you see claims that somebody can help you reach 110 just by purchasing their product, or that maybe they'll refer to objectives and say, oh, you can meet 300 of the objectives by buying my system. The Cyber AB has said publicly that's not possible. And in fact, you should report them. Please do. A lot of this stuff has to be done by you. You can't buy your way into the certificate. It requires your team and your company to be involved. Michael, Brian, are there any other gotchas you've been seeing?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest things, again, I've said this over and over, is preparation, and people just really thinking they they have they went and bought GCC High, Microsoft GCC High, and boom, I'm good to go. Well, no. And if your entire organization, it's not an IT problem, this is a business problem, and or a business opportunity. I don't know whatever you want to look at it, but your entire business needs to be involved in this, right? And from the top down, you need to have buy-in, and it's not, if just the IT team shows up to the assessment and does all this work, you're going to be asked to bring on other folks, to answer the questions, and you don't want them to be surprised.
Yeah, you might think of it this way. About 2/3 of this is physical and operational security, and 1/3 is technical. And if you hold that in your mind, you may be well served there. Now we can sort of move to some questions. A person asked here about a budget for 5 to 10 staff. I'm not sure if they're asking like to prepare from zero to hero, or if they're asking about the assessment. For the assessment, the market is all over the place. $30,000 to $100,000 are things that are out there, but it needs to be tuned to your environment and the level of effort to assess your environment. You should probably not shop on price alone. Any thoughts, Brian, about possible budgets for a 5 to 10 person company to get ready?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I think it's all over the map, but I would, just for the, setting the assessment aside, and the cost of the, environments aside, human capital, I mean, you're gonna need to plan on somebody being dedicated to getting ready for CMMC, and to living it going forward and tracking everything going forward, because you have to keep maintaining this. So, you have the initial cost of getting it set up, which is probably, I would wager for that size of company, if you go out and get some good help, it's probably going to be $100,000 to $200,000.
Yeah.
And then the cost of ownership, right? I mean, because you have to keep maintaining your environment, maintaining all the evidence as you go on. So it's not a light endeavor.
The ongoing compliance, right? That's what we're looking at.
Mhm.
It's a program now, right? So you have, IT programs, you have business, but now you're gonna have this compliance program you're gonna need in the company to maintain and keep it running.
Yeah, somebody asked in the questions whether if they're all working on GFE, government furnished equipment, are they still going to have to do the CMMC thing? Um, do you guys have some thoughts in regards to that?
Well, I absolutely refuse to give a blanket answer.
Sure.
But your environment would need to be architected in a way that government furnished equipment in the CMMC scoping process is considered a specialized asset. So while it is in scope of the assessment, it's not assessed against the 110 controls, because if it's GFE, you may not have configuration rights, right? You're configuring it the way the government tells you to. However, your overall environment will still need to be compliant. Now, if you're working 100% on a government site, no, all of your stuff is out of scope. However, if you have corporate systems of any sort, and you're storing contract information on those corporate systems, at a minimum, you're going to be level 1, right?
Yeah.
Because
Everyone
federal contract
needs to be level 1, right?
Yeah.
Somebody asked about COTS products, and the rule does call out some exclusions for COTS. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, CUTS is excluded from the environment. So if you have a CUTS product, then you're only level 1. You only have to be level 1.
And that's self-attestation.
And by CUTS, we mean you sell a product to both the public and the government without any alterations in it. If you customize it for the government, it now stops being a CUTS product.
And it's not that you're using COTS products.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Yes.
If you're selling a COTS product, then you're not, it doesn't apply to you.
Yeah, so somebody asked again, what are the penalties for non-compliance or misrepresentations? Will FCA liability apply if we self-attest inaccurately? And the answer is yes.
Yes.
Yeah, so here's an analog to think of, maybe perhaps with home insurance and business insurance. If you bought insurance on your house so that if it burned down, your house would be repaired, as a person, as a homeowner, you're doing something that's called to the best of your knowledge. And so if you said you had 5 smoke alarms and you had 4, it's likely, it's not guaranteed, but it's likely they would cover the claim. In business insurance, you are making a legal attestation that's true. And if you were short one smoke detector, they could deny the claim. It is the same principle here. Whoever's signing off, when you're doing a self-attestation, you are saying legally that these things are accurate and true. And this is one of the things that is pushing people to get level 2 certification and engage with CCAs to go through this.
I'd also like to point out the False Claims Act applies to level 1. So, so in all federal contracts, even so, if you're not doing those 15 basic controls across the whole federal, any federal contract you have, you're subject to the False Claims Act. For CMMC level 1, don't take it lightly, even though it's just self-attestation. You need to follow the level 1 assessment guide and have done, I think it's 45 or 48. I forget. I counted at one point. Assessment objectives in level 1, and you must meet all of those.
All right. So we have 2 more questions here. The question is, I have contractors who are internally certified to my company, but they are using our company domain email and company issued laptops. Do I still need to require them to be certified on their own company? So I think they're asking, they have subs that are using their equipment.
So the CUI does not leave the main contractor's environment. They're just inviting their subs into their company. So that the sub company then would only have to be level 1 because they're not processing, storing, or transmitting the CUI. They're just coming into your environment, which is a great solution for primes with a lot of small companies, a lot of small subs, is to let them in. But like Brian just said, everyone has to be level 1, and you still have to do that regardless.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's possible. I mean, if they're basically like 1099 employees and they're just only working in your environment on the contract, well, then they would be treated essentially as your employees. They should follow the same processes. You should do, the background screening, the onboarding, and et cetera for them. Yeah, but if they have their own systems and it's flowing, information is flowing down to them, then they have to be either level 1 or level 2. Yeah.
All right, last question. Have you seen any issues or complexities if a company stands up a separate environment that is CMMC compliant?
That would be the best solution. That is the best solution. Keep as much corporate systems out of the environment as possible. Have 2 separate domains, have the government inform the government. We have a secure enclave, have them send emails there, send data there, and then your corporate environment stays separate from it, and you won't have to keep documenting it.
Yeah, and we call these enclaves.
Yeah, and in order to make it an enclave, right, it has to be physically or logically separated from the parts of your system you want to keep out of scope. Right.
Sure, and I would say from our observations, some larger companies have multiple enclaves for different projects and or cage codes.
Mm-hmm.
So even in larger companies, sometimes they have separate environments. Additionally, something to consider is by carefully developing an enclave for a specific task or task orders. Later on, if you need to expand it, you have a platform that can do an enclave to enterprise conversion in a more controlled fashion with well-developed policies, procedures, and practices. All right, that's all of the questions. Any last thoughts, gentlemen, before we close out this webinar?
Prepare, document.
And prepare.
Yeah.
Make your assessors happy. If you prepare well and provide a nice roadmap for your assessor to follow, they will be very happy. And if you don't, they'll be very unhappy, and you don't want an unhappy assessor. It's just not a good thing.
All right, so there's a question we can't answer because it's specific advice, but there is documentation for it, and you should attend the Cyber AB calls on Tuesdays. Sign up for them. The question is, if I'm hosting CUI for a DIB in a hypervisor and have CUI data in separate VMs at my CSP, and this is a hot topic right now, we're not going to answer it on the call because we're waiting for clarification from the government on this. It's a good question. Stay tuned to the Cyber AB for more clarity.
The last Tuesday of each month is the town hall. Last Tuesday.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful afternoon.